Hey guys, hope e-learning is going well. In order to help keep us on track a little bit more and help you guys be able to understand a little bit more, I'm going to be voicing over all of our PowerPoints for the rest of the time that we're out. Obviously, as of right now, we don't have an answer of when we go back for sure. May 1st is what it's at right now, but we see how quickly this is changing. So hopefully we'll be back after May 1st, but in the case we're not, we will continue to do this throughout the semester. All right, so today we're learning about Chapter 14. This is food and nutrition related human services. So, nutrition is the study of how the body uses nutrients in foods and how these nutrients impact the diet, your productivity, your health, and also how disease affects the body. Career opportunities related to food and nutrition include food and beverage service workers, dietitians and nutritionists, registered dietetic technicians, nutrition educators, food scientists, and entrepreneurial opportunities. So, for the food and beverage services industry, this focuses on preparing, packaging, and selling food and beverages for people to eat and drink. We have two different ventures that this exists under, both commercial and institutional. Commercial is like your full service and quick service restaurants. So, your Applebee's, your McDonald's, also specialty food providers. So, thinking like Cold Stone specializes in ice cream, and then catering services. So, any company that is willing to do catering for a small party, a large party, and anything in between. Institutional ventures then are more like your school and hospital cafeterias, your coffee shops that have, or your bookstores that have a coffee shop within them, sorry. So for instance, meaning like the Starbucks inside of the Barnes and Noble. And then also the vendors that are inside of the sporting stadium, the spot where you go get your drinks and you go get your popcorn, you go get your hot dog during your baseball game, for instance, that you're at. Those are all vendors inside of that stadium. Food and beverage services workers. So the types of workers include food service managers. They're responsible for the daily operations of a food service establishment. There's a lot that goes into being a food service manager. It's not an easy job, and it's not something to be taken lightly. A lot of times you work long hours, and you're responsible for a lot, including the people underneath you. General managers are performing all of the administrative tasks, so they're the ones who are reporting to the district manager, reporting to corporate, things like that. So they have a lot on their plate also. They're not only in charge of all of their employees underneath them, but they have to do all of that administrative paperwork to make sure everything is running smoothly, making sure they're keeping up with budgets, making sure that people aren't working too many hours, meaning that they're losing money in the amount of hours given out versus the amount of sales they're making, all of those things. Then the assistant managers work underneath the general managers to oversee that dining service. So they are going to be basically the person that your entry level employee would usually report to. So usually there's that chain of command. Then that entry level position is known as food and beverage serving workers. They're the front line of customer service in a food service establishment. So for instance, thinking fast food, they're the person behind the cash register taking your order. They're the person at the fry station frying your french fries and putting salt on them. In a restaurant, they're your waiters, your waitresses, your bartenders, your bussers, your hosts and your hostesses. So your line cooks in the back in actually cooking your food. Those are all food and beverage serving workers. Then we have executive chefs. So basically they're what we call back of the house managers. Back of the house is always in the kitchen. Front of the house is always in the dining area. So the executive chef works in the back of the house. They're in charge of the whole kitchen, all of their personnel, making sure orders are taken care of, making sure they have the adequate amount of food to make everything that they're supposed to that day, and making sure that all of their employees are doing what they're responsible for also. Then we have personal chefs, and these are people who cook for clients in a home setting. This is pretty uncommon in the normal day-to-day lifestyle for most people, but we do know that we have more wealthy people out there that can't afford that. Then we have dietitians and nutritionists. These people help others apply and use knowledge to improve their health and wellness. So we have 3 levels or 3 different forms of being a dietitian and nutritionist. We have clinical dietitians and nutritionists. These are healthcare professionals who earn the RDN credential, usually having to get a bachelor's or a master's degree for that. community dietitians and nutritionists that are informing the public on food, health, and nutrition related issues, and then management dietitians who are planning food programs in the institution such as schools. So for instance, we have a management dietitian technically that works for Lake Central. That person plans all of our menus. They submit all of our paperwork to the state to show how many students are actually eating lunch versus how much food they're making sure also that when they submit our menu planning to the state that it falls within the governmental guidelines so they don't lose funding. Registered dietetic technicians. These people work under the direct supervision of a registered dietitian, nutritionist to provide health and nutritional care. They develop, implement, and review nutrition care plans established by a hospital clinical dietitian. So, for instance, they may be taking the intake forms of somebody new coming into the hospital that is staying in the hospital, and they're making sure that all of their nutritional needs are met by the kitchen. So making sure that when they get their daily meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, making sure that those meals fall within their dietary guidelines. So for instance, somebody with high blood pressure is going to have a lower amount of sodium in their diet, so their food should have less salt content in them. Also, a registered dietetic technician is involved in all aspects of food preparation and service. Nutrition educators are providing nutrition information to students and food service workers in both public and private forms of education. Traditionally, when we think of this, most of you will probably think of Mrs. Schmidt or Mr. Peters, who teaches foods at Lake Central High School. So they are teaching basically nutrition and culinary-based curriculum. We also can study that further and take similar classes in college that go a little bit more in depth. Also, you can learn under a medical profession or in other health-related programs. Then we have private businesses like health clubs and spas that may invite a nutrition educator to come in. For instance, like Omni, if you guys have ever heard of Omni, they're a pretty large fitness club around us, and they often will do things like this where they bring in a dietitian or a nutritionist to talk about how to make a healthy meal or how to choose healthy snacks, things like that. Then we have our media and technology. This includes television news, health and wellness features. So when this comes to my mind, I think of Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz is a really common one that has made his way through the media. He has his own television show. He talks about the latest and the greatest forms of everything related to nutrition, your diet, and weight loss. So we hear a lot of those important topics from him. Food scientists are developing new products and determining whether food products are healthy, safe, palatable, and convenient. So if you're wondering what palatable means, it means to make something want to be eaten. Is the texture good? Is the flavor good? Does it leave something to be desired? Are you wanting more out of it? Or does it actually quench your thirst? Or does it take your desire or hunger away from you? So is it palatable and convenient? And then applying science knowledge to determine new or better ways to prepare, distribute, package, use, and store foods. We're always looking for ways to extend shelf life. When our shelf life can be extended, that means that we can feed more people with it. We can ship those goods out to other countries and other areas of the world to make sure that people are eating. So that's why we're always looking to increase that shelf life, even though we know it's not always the healthiest of choices to add chemicals to increase our shelf life. Also performing basic research behind food and the science behind food and everything that goes into that. So the preparation, again, that shelf life part of it, the flavoring. If you guys have ever wondered how, for instance, like Lay's potato chips, how they always have that contest where they're always getting people to submit new flavors of potato chips and they make that. If you've ever been wondering how do they make those flavors, their food scientists are the ones that are behind that. They're the ones figuring out what is the proper combination of flavors to get that exact flavor on that potato chip. And then enforcing government regulations, food inspection, sanitation, and safety measures is another thing a food scientist may do. Entrepreneurship opportunities. So people may freelance or contract in this career field. There's a great source of creative expression within food. So you can do things like cater, where you may design, prepare, and serve menus for events. Also, a lot of people recently have moved to having food trucks or mobile restaurants, something that's easy to bring to like a fair. Thinking of like your fair food. Coming to like the Friday Night Griffith Festival and the Downtown Hobart Friday Night Festival thing that they have. A lot of those events would not go on if the food trucks weren't there to bring in that food. In order to be successful in this career field, you need to have solid scientific grounding. You need to be creative and have an eye for detail. You also should be health conscious. You need to be passionate about the product or the service that you are giving. You need to consider the needs of the end user. You need to be flexible and be able to problem solve under time constraints, and you also need to be creative, adaptable, and calm. As far as the education to be successful, educational requirements and training may vary. So, if you want to be a food scientist, you need at least a bachelor's degree in food science, a lot of times pursuing further education. Registered dietitian credentials are going to vary from state to state, but in most states, you do need at least a master's degree to be a registered dietitian. A degree in business administration may be necessary if you want to own your own business to understand the business side of everything. How does that operate? And then you also may need specialized culinary training if you are actually going to be working with the food. Healthy eating is really important during every stage of life, and the behaviors that we establish at a young age will last with us throughout an entire lives. So it's important to try to teach children at a young age about how to eat healthy. The USDA, which is the United States Department of Agriculture, they came up with a system called My Plate. So you may remember the food guide pyramid or My Pyramid from when you were in like elementary school, middle school. But the USDA My Plate has now been around for, I'd say, about 6 or 7 years. And it basically divides your plate into servings. So it shows you how much grains should you have, how many vegetables should you have, how much fruit should you have, how much protein should you have, and how much dairy should you have every day with every meal. So, talking about nutrition across the lifespan, starting with before and during pregnancy. A woman needs a well-balanced diet, a healthy body weight, and physical fitness, or needs to be thinking about physical fitness before she gets pregnant. So, making sure that she's in the best physical shape she can be. Every meal becomes a meal for both mom and baby during pregnancy. So, mom needs to be aware she needs to eat additional calories, but those additional calories need to come from a healthy source. Eating an extra box of Ho-Hos for dinner to get her additional nutritional calories in is not a good source of nutrients. But eating an extra serving of vegetables or eating an extra serving of whole grains, that's a great opportunity for mom to get some extra calories in to make sure that baby's getting the nutrients it needs. Also, mom needs to gain weight during her pregnancy. Most women gain healthily 25 to 35 pounds during their pregnancy. If you do not gain at least 25 pounds, there's usually some concern from the doctor. So make sure that if you know anyone that's pregnant that's losing weight or not gaining weight, that you encourage them to seek out assistance from their doctor. Also, if you start your pregnancy being overweight or underweight, there's some additional concerns that the doctor may have to look into. It's important to take your prenatal vitamins your entire pregnancy. The earliest sign of pregnancy is when you should start to take those. They're really good for most women once they hit childbearing age anyway to take because they have a lot of folic acid and a lot of really strong vitamins that you need to be healthy in general. Also, ladies, as a perk, prenatal vitamins are good for your hair, skin, and nails. And then food-related illnesses. So food-related illnesses is of a concern. For instance, like raw chicken gives you, hopefully you just said salmonella. So thinking of food-related illnesses like that, if you don't cook your chicken long enough, or if you don't cook your ground beef long enough, or if you leave your food out on the counter for too long. For instance, maybe you order a pizza with your friends on a Friday night, and you guys order that at 8 o'clock, and then it sits on the counter till midnight when you're hungry again. Technically, bacteria has started to grow on that pizza. You can only leave something out for up to 2 hours before it needs to either be reheated, or refrigerated. So one or the other needs to happen at that 2 hour mark, or bacteria starts to exponentially grow on there and you're more likely to get sick. Okay, so going on with our life cycle, during our infancy time, good nutrition is critical. Nutrition comes in liquid form for newborns. So babies are either bottle fed with formula or breastfed. Also, you can breastfeed a baby with a bottle. Mom can pump that breast milk out of her breast and feed it to baby through a bottle. But either way, even in child development, I will teach you fed is best. Making sure baby gets those nutrients, whether it's from breast milk or formula, does not really matter at the end of the day, just making sure they get some type of nutrients. Yes, there are pros to having breast milk over formula, but if a mom can't breastfeed, chooses not to breastfeed, she should not be shamed for that. Never, ever, ever. As long as she's providing nutrients for her child, at the end of the day, that's what matters. We start to introduce solid foods to newborns between 6 and 12 months. So in that first year of life, you wait about 6 months. And our first solid food usually comes in the form of like baby food or a mashed fruit or vegetable. Often pretty common being like mashed up avocado, mashed up bananas, pureed pears, pureed peaches, things like that. Or of course getting the baby food version of those where that stuff comes pre-pureed. Then during our early childhood years, children are eating smaller amounts still, but larger than what they did during their toddler years, but still not the same as the rest of the family. They're often influenced by a caregiver's eating habits. I always say when I teach this slide that when I was a child, my dad told me that eating scrambled eggs was like eating brains because that's what scrambled eggs looked like. So guess who didn't eat scrambled eggs for years? Me, because I thought that that meant that I was eating brains. So definitely make sure that you don't discourage children from eating food based upon your own opinion or your own thoughts of it. Also, in these years, children need to eat on a regular schedule without distractions or stress. So putting them to eat in front of the television is not a good decision because they're going to sit there and focus on the TV, not focus on the meal that they're supposed to be eating in front of them. And then often that ends up in arguments because the parents are frustrated the child's not eating, but the child is simply not eating because they're distracted. They're not purposely not eating, they're just distracted by what's going on around them. Then our middle childhood years, children become a little less picky. Their appetites start to increase. They start to make more of their own food choices. So we see this like our early elementary school, middle elementary school years, even leading into middle school. Making sure that when children are making their own food choices at school, that they are aware of any type of dietary problems. So for instance, if your child's allergic to peanuts, you wouldn't want them trading their chocolate chip granola bar for a peanut butter flavored one. Obviously, that could cause very much concern. The child can go into anaphylactic shock, need an EpiPen, and all of that craziness. So we want to make sure children are aware of the possibility of them consuming something that could be bad for them if they have allergies. Also, children have to learn how to make nutrient-dense food choices. So making sure that they know how to choose foods that are better for them. So choosing a serving of salad as their side instead of getting an extra serving of French fries. Making sure that they realize that there's more nutrients that are going to actually make their body feel better in that salad than in that serving of French fries. Then the adolescent years, children become more responsible for their own food choices in meal preparation. This is where you guys are at. You're starting to cook things on your own. Parents may not always be home, so you have to fend for yourself. Also, it's pretty common for children of this age to start skipping meals or eating unhealthy snacks. We see this all the time at school. I ask you guys all the time, who ate lunch today, or why aren't you eating? And often we see kids are skipping meals at lunchtime because they don't like school lunch, they didn't bring money, they forgot their lunch at home, or they decide that instead of eating whatever is for school lunch, they're just going to have a bag of flaming hot Cheetos. But then often that same student is wondering, why are they so tired after lunch? Why don't they have any energy? Why don't they feel good? And often it's because of those reasons. Same thing with breakfast. Eating breakfast before coming to school or even right before first hour starts or right as first hour starts is going to help you keep that energy level up through first hour or fifth hour, whatever your first morning class is there. Making sure that you're keeping those energy levels where they need to be. You also should be choosing nutrient-dense foods just like during middle childhood years. Early adulthood, your energy needs decrease, so often reducing the amount of food is necessary. But a lot of times we see adults don't do that. So that's where we start to see, even in college, if you've ever heard of the freshman 15, a lot of times what that means is that that college student has gone away to school. They're making their own food choices now. Their energy needs have started to decrease as they're starting to age. They're making their own food choices without a nice family cooked meal full of nutrients from their parents. They may opt to have a waffle for dinner in the dining hall instead of eating a healthy protein-based dish with a side of vegetables and some fruit for dessert. Instead of doing something like that, they may choose a waffle and may choose a dish of ice cream for their dessert. Obviously, being able to see the big, vast difference of nutrients there that are available. If you choose to eat like that all the time, obviously weight gain is going to come. So it's important to make sure that as the energy needs are decreasing, that you're reducing that food intake also. Nutrient needs are increasing though, so just because the energy needs decrease doesn't mean that you don't need more nutrients. So it means that you need to choose or make better choices. So you need to choose products that have more nutrients. Dairy products with high levels of calcium, meat products with high levels of iron, getting potassium from fruits like bananas, zinc, vitamin D, B vitamins, all of those are essential for the body. Also, selecting smaller portion sizes and food items with more fruits and vegetables is important during these years. So, nutrition during middle adulthood, energy needs will continue to decrease and weight gain is common. We often hear this being called the middle age spread because even with that transition from the teen years to the early adulthood years, if you don't keep up with that decreased amount of food into that middle adulthood time, your 30s and 40s, you definitely will start to gain weight because your body does not need as much food to function any longer. Physical abilities are declining, and also you need to make good nutrition and make your physical activity an important part of your day. So making sure that you're staying active, making sure that you are making good health choices for your body in order for your body to be fueled and to be able to be fully active. So this just says, did you know without some change in diet and activity levels, the average middle-aged adult actually gains 10 to 20 pounds during the middle adulthood stage of life. So again, that middle-age spread that I was just talking about. I'm sure most of you would probably say, I don't want to gain 10 to 20 pounds. So making sure that you are being aware of what you should be eating for your body. The older adulthood years, the body loses its ability to absorb nutrients. Adults often need dietary supplements, needing to take even extra amounts of vitamins beyond just that daily vitamin. Of course, though, always seek out the recommendation of your doctor. Just don't go start taking supplements on your own. Supplements are not regulated by the FDA, by the Food and Drug Administration. Most supplements have not been approved by them. They usually don't go for approval until we actually start to see negative things happening from those dietary supplements. So for instance, if there's a report that 10 people have died from taking these dietary supplements, that's when the FDA steps in. So make sure you're aware of what the long-term consequences of that dietary supplement is before you take it. Also, any mandatory medications and the state of health that the person's already in may affect their nutritional needs. Special dietary needs. So certain choices and conditions result in some people having special dietary needs. Being a competitive athlete, being a vegetarian, having a food intolerance, having food allergies, or diabetes can all affect a person's dietary needs. Maintaining physical health. So weight gain is not the best gauge for determining a person's health. The body composition describes the proportion of body fat to lean mass, so meaning your muscle, your bone, and water in your body. People who have a high amount of body fat in relation to lean body mass are considered overweight, And obesity is a really common term I'm sure you've heard of. It's a condition characterized by an excessive amount of body fat. And this has become a big concern in our society in the last 20 years. Physical activity is really important to help fight that obesity. So, the physical activity guidelines for Americans are currently children between the ages of 6 and 17 should be physically active for 1 or more hours each day. That includes all of you sitting at home during this time frame where we are quarantined. You can still go for a walk, you can still go for a run, you can put on a workout video on your TV, but doing something to be active is important each day. Adults 18 or older should get 150 minutes of moderate activity per week or 75 minutes of vigorous activity each week. Types of activities include aerobic, muscle strength training, and bone strengthening. This also can be a social activity. We know right now we cannot do social activities, but in the case that we wanted to, this could be a great social activity, going to group exercise classes, meeting at the gym together, etc. Unhealthy eating patterns. Some people develop abnormal and potentially harmful eating habits, including fad dieting, extreme dieting, or eating disorders. Eating disorders are probably something you've been learning about since late elementary school, early middle school, and health class, but it involves an abnormal eating pattern that can cause severe or life-threatening physical problems. This includes anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. Again, just to refresh your memory, anorexia is where people limit the amount of food they bring into their body. Bulimia is where they purge that food, whether it's through throwing it up or forcing it out using a laxative. And then binge eating disorders, where people sit down and eat a large amount of calories, not uncommon for it to be 3,000 to 5,000 calories at one time when somebody is binging. In order to overcome an eating disorder, a lot of times people need professional help to treat their condition, and you can enhance recovery by getting early diagnosis and intervention. Healthy meals are important. This contributes to wellness and productivity throughout your whole lifespan. Eating a well-balanced meal is visually appealing and does not duplicate tastes. It offers contrast, variety, and color, texture, flavor, and temperature. Food safety and sanitation is also important. Foodborne illness is very common, it's very costly, it's preventable, and a huge public health problem. Food safety when purchasing, transporting, preparing, serving, and storing food is all part of food safety and sanitation. So even from the moment of buying groceries, making sure that when you purchase those groceries that you are keeping your meats away from your produce. Your produce is your fruits and your vegetables. Making sure that we keep any cross-contamination from happening. Always washing our hands after touching things like raw meat, eggs, things like that. Handling and preparing ingredients, making sure that if you've cut raw chicken on one cutting board, you need to either pick out a new cutting board or completely wash and dry that cutting board with dish soap before you can use that on your other ingredient, like maybe the broccoli you're preparing as your side dish. Cooking meat, we need to make sure that it is cooked to the proper temperature. For instance, chicken, all chicken-based dishes need to be cooked to 165 degrees. So making sure that you're using a thermometer to temp your meat. And then when serving a buffet or a reception of people, a large amount of people, buffet style, making sure that that food does not sit out for longer than 2 hours like we talked about earlier. So this slide talks about when buying groceries, how food needs to be handled carefully. We just talked about what grocery items need to be kept separate. Definitely making sure our meats are separate of our produce is a big factor, but also even making sure that our frozen foods are kept away from our warm foods. We don't want temperatures to change or interwork that way. Reading a recipe is really important for somebody who wants to cook. Reading the recipe takes preparation, and you need to understand the language of the recipe from start to finish before you can begin. So the language obviously is important, making sure that it's in a language that you speak, but also the language of a recipe. Do you know what all of the coding means? So LB, do you know that that is short for pound? Or looking at teaspoon, That is shortened often as TSP. Did you know that that's short for teaspoon? Tablespoon is capital T or it's capital TBSP, tablespoon. So making sure that you understand the acronyms and the language of the recipe. The role of the ingredients, what is that ingredient being used for? A lot of times the role of something like salt is just for flavor, but if you're using something for something like flour, that may be to increase the thickness of the sauce or of the product. Useful information of the recipe is important to take away. Making sure that you follow any good practices before beginning. So did they tell you to have melted butter versus softened butter for your baked good? Measuring first and processing second. So make sure you pre-measure your ingredients so you don't mess something up and then start to combine them later. Because if you measure something incorrectly but you've already dumped it into the bowl with your other ingredients, you're going to have to start everything from scratch. And then your liquid and dry ingredients, make sure you're using liquid measuring cups for your liquid ingredients and dry measuring cups for your dry ingredients. And of course, follow the instructions of the recipe. So the table and the food, setting and preparing a table is important. So when having a formal meal, usually we set down a tablecloth first. This gives a good visual appeal, and also we then may add things like placemats or guest place settings. As you can see in this picture here, they not only have a placemat, but they have a nice folded napkin underneath that bowl. They have 2 plates. They've got their forks, knives, and spoons set out. So they have all of those items there, along with the cups on the table. If you guys see here, there are cups on both sides for each guest. Meal service can either be formal, which is like this table setting here, or we can have serving dishes, which is more of the buffet style or what we would call family style, where you pass a bowl around the table and you scoop out your own serving of that dish. The rewards and demands in this career field. Every day is different with new challenges. There's long work hours in this career field. It can be physically demanding and often coming with low pay. There are a lot of advancement possibilities, though, for this career. Future trends. Job prospects are expected to grow at a faster than average rate. Career opportunities exist in the field of nutrition and in retail and marketing segments of the food industry.